I like World War II games. Part of the reason is probably that I just like first-person shooters, and almost all World War II games are first-person shooters. But more than that, I've known a lot of guys who were there. Hey, two of my uncles were there. Every war that the U.S. has been in since then has been a little iffy. Korea, Vietnam, both Gulf Wars, Afghanistan. For whatever reason, we've never been completely clear about why we were fighting in those. In World War II, everybody knew. You had one nutcase in Berlin trying to take over the world, and you had another nutcase over in Tokyo trying to, you guessed it, take over the world. Hitler was evil, there's no question about that. Hirohito was crazy. Supposedly the two were allies, but I can't help wondering what would have happened if each had won the war in their part of the world and suddenly all they had to fight was each other. You know, that might make a good game.
I wonder. Oh well.
There are several World War II game series, including the ever-popular Call of Duty, which we've already looked at, Medal of Honor, and the one we're looking at today, Brothers in Arms. Each series has features that make it stand out, which of course is what sells games. With Call of Duty, it's pretty much pure action. Hordes of enemies come at you and you have to be pretty clever to beat them. With Medal of Honor, the hook is more the medals and awards you can win. I've played most all the games in both of those series, and to be honest, once I finished a game, I wasn't all that interested in playing it again. Even Medal of Honor Airborne, which was one of the coolest games I ever played, couldn't hold my interest a second time through. That's why I find the Brothers in Arms series so refreshing. It has features that keep me coming back and playing the games over and over again. What are those features? Let's find out as we dive into the first game, Brothers in Arms, Road to Hill 30. I'm Irving, and I have no life, just like you.
The Ballad of Irving. Irving. Big fat Irving. Big sport Irving. The 142nd fastest gun in the West.
At the time I'm doing this, there are 3 games in the series: Road to Hill 30, Earned in Blood, and Hell's Highway. Each game is based on real events in the war and real people who were there and took part in the battles, though the names are different. During the war, a man named Colonel Marshall went around to different command posts and such and interviewed soldiers about battles and firefights they had just been in. His reports and others like them were known as after-action reports, and they became part of the official government records of the war. The military used these reports to see what they could learn and how they could do things better, and the folks who made the Brothers in Arms series used them to design the game levels so they'd be as authentic as possible. That's one thing that sets these games apart. I got the first 2 games for the PC and played them constantly on my laptop until I had to bump up to Windows 7, whereupon the games weren't compatible anymore. I tried to get newer versions or a patch or something through the company I originally downloaded them from. They don't carry these games for the PC anymore. Apparently nobody does. So I either have to play them on an older computer or do without. Thankfully, they're available in a 2-pack for the Wii, and I've started that a couple of times. But my hands are too shaky to do things like precise aiming. The games work fine and the Wii controls are a blast to use. If you have steady hands and work with the Wii a lot, or if you have one of these, you'll probably enjoy playing these games on it. At the moment, my Wii isn't interested in reading any discs at all, so the clips you'll see are from the older PC version. At some point, I'll definitely get another Wii so I can play these again. I just don't get tired of them. This is a squad-based game. You have anywhere from 1 to 6 men under your command, and you can tell them what to do. Well, to a certain extent. You can tell them, go there, come here, and shoot at those guys. Thing is, that's all you need. And it's really cool being able to move your men around so they attack the enemy from different angles and locations. To help you with this, you can go into what's called a situational view screen. Basically, this is your map. It shows where you are, where other friendlies are, and where the enemy is, and where your objective is. Unlike some other games, you can't actually direct your men in this screen. It's strictly for sizing up the situation and deciding what to do next. I don't use it a lot, but give it a try. The main thing that stands out in the Brothers in Arms series, though, is what are called suppression rings. A suppression ring is a big red circle over the enemy's head. The idea is you or your squad put fire on the enemy to suppress them. This keeps them crouched down and they can only shoot back sporadically if at all, and when they do, their shots will probably go wild. While that's going on, you or your squad sneak around to their side or back where they're not covered and take them out. This maneuver is known as flanking, and it's a key element of these games. When you or your men put fire on a group of enemies, their suppression ring gradually turns from red to gray. When it's all gray, they're fully suppressed and it's time to start the flanking. Of course, when the enemy has this big red or gray disc over his head, it tells you exactly where he is, but there's really no way around that. If you aren't crazy about the suppression ring system, hang on, there's a way to play without it. Road to Hill 30 has 4 difficulty modes: easy, normal, hard, and authentic. If you're a hardcore gamer, you probably want to go straight to the toughest one. Too bad you can't. You have to play through the game on one of the lesser modes in order to unlock Authentic mode. Trust me, you want to do this because in Authentic, not only do you not have the suppression rings, but you take damage a lot faster, the enemy is a lot smarter and maneuvers in ways that'll make you stare in awe, and most important, no save points. In the other modes, you have save points here and there through the missions, usually once you've completed a step or stage in the progress of the mission. With Authentic, you get all the way through the mission or you start it over. That can get frustrating as hell, but once you've played through the game in one of the other modes, you have a small advantage because you have at least a smidgen of an idea of what to expect. Trust me, you'll need it. As you finish levels, you also unlock extra content. Unlike your average game that just gives you different clothes for your character or something equally meaningless, this one unlocks really cool information. Pictures of some actual after-action reports, interviews with the game's military advisors, photos of how they did the animation, photos of the actual places where the battles happen. This is some cool stuff. They actually used motion capture technology to make the character animation realistic, digitized actual photos to make stuff like buildings and tanks look as real as they could, and you get a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff about how they did it. I can spend an hour just browsing through this stuff. But the thing that keeps me coming back to these games is the characters. Unlike the other World War II games I've seen, with this one you actually get to know the men. Your character, Matt Baker, spends a lot of time reflecting on the men he leads, and through dialogue during and between missions, you learn all about these guys. By the time you're a few levels in, you really care about them. You care what happens to these guys. When one of them takes damage, you're concerned. When one of them gets killed, you miss him, not only because you need him to put fire on the Germans, but because he's your friend. Now, unless he gets killed in a cutscene, don't worry, because he'll be back when the next mission starts. But you get what I mean. These guys are real to you. They're your friends. They're your comrades. They're your brothers in arms. That's what keeps me coming back. The gameplay is great, the missions are diverse, and the modes are different enough from each other that each one presents its own challenge. But I keep coming back because I like these guys. It's that simple. The gameplay is pretty straightforward. In all the modes except Authentic, you have a compass that tells you which way to go and gives indications of how close you are to the objective, where your squads are, your health, and all that stuff. You also have an ammo indicator that tells you when it's time to reload and how many clips you have left. A crosshair or reticle in the center of the screen shows where you're pointing, and you can aim down the barrel if you so choose. All basic FPS stuff. The sound absolutely rocks. Each squad member has a distinct voice, so most of the time you can tell who's talking, even in the parts that don't have subtitles. And the weapon sounds are outstanding. I've never heard better.
No one stop firing! He's down! He's down!
After the first couple of missions, you can pick up weapons that dead enemies have dropped, and it's usually a good idea. You have a certain amount of ammo, and when that runs low, you don't really have a way to get more most of the time. Your basic weapons are the M1 Garand and the Thompson machine gun. Ah, the Thompson. Tommy gun if you're related to Al Capone. Tiny clip, kick like a farm horse, and the accuracy of a spitwad. I haven't seen a game yet in which the Thompson is actually useful. The German MP40 is so much more accurate and easy to handle, it's silly. The M1 is nice in that it's an automatic, so you can empty your 8-round clip in the time it takes the Germans to fire 2 shots with their bolt-action K98s, but the sight is a little weird. It's hard to tell where the sweet spot is, and it seems to change from time to time. If I need to pump a lot of shots into some enemies or keep them suppressed, I'll stick with the M1. But if I need to do some real precision pick-off shooting, I'll usually swap it for the K98. The sights on that one are much more accurate. Another weird thing is that it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 shots from the M1 to bring down a German soldier, where the K98 often as not gives you a kill in 1 shot. Gotta love German engineering. Sometimes you get to take on tanks. The obvious weapon for this would be a bazooka, but you only get a bazooka in 1 level. There are 2 basic ways of taking down a tank. This is one.
I'm out! Reloading! One less sardine can!
The other is to find a crate of German Panzerfaust weapons. Of course, in the final level you can't do either one, but I'm getting ahead of myself. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the Panzerfaust. By the way, I've just been handed this by Sir Nitpick. The clip you are about to see actually comes from the second game, Brothers in Arms Earned in Blood. I'm not really sure what his point is, but there you go. The Panzerfaust was a single-shot anti-tank weapon the Germans developed so their soldiers could take on tanks without having to carry a ton of stuff. It was light enough that most soldiers could carry one in addition to their regular weapons just in case. And since it was a single-shot deal, once a soldier fired his, he could just drop the launcher and go on about his business. You see that once in a while in this game, but most often there are crates of them tucked away here and there, and you have to find the crate, pick one up, flip up the sight, aim it, and fire. Unfortunately, usually by the time that happens, the tank also has you in its own sights. So you have to grab one, run like hell to get away from the tank's big gun, find a good spot, and then fire. The problem is, it always takes more than 1 Panzerfaust hit to destroy the tank. I don't know why. In some other games I really like, most notably Hidden and Dangerous 2, the Panzerfaust is a one-hit kill weapon as long as you hit the target. Not here. In-game prompts tell you that the German tanks are most vulnerable from the back, so get behind the tank and hit it that way. And you might get a kill in the first shot. Ain't gonna happen. Why? Because no matter how sneaky you are, no matter how much you move behind buildings, trees, whatever, that stupid tank always knows where you are. I actually tried this. I picked up a Panzerfaust, ran around an entire block of buildings, and circled way around behind the tank. And when I popped out of cover, I was still staring down the barrel of that cannon. And an instant later, I was restarting at the last checkpoint because the tank handed my ass to me. This Panzerfaust crap is the worst part of the game, because not only do you need an average of 4 hits to destroy the tank, but these things are about as accurate as this. And they have the range of a watermelon seed. If you're anything resembling a safe distance from the tank, most of your shots will fall short. You have to try and figure out how to arc them just right so that they reach the tank without going over, and that can take anywhere from 3 to 10 shots depending on how clumsy you are. There's no health indicator for the tank, so it's all guesswork. After the first hit, it'll usually start smoking, but that really doesn't tell you anything except it might get cancer someday. It doesn't pour out more smoke as you hit it again or anything like that, just eventually it bursts into flame and a few seconds later explodes. Until that happens, keep firing, because if you don't, you're screwed. The really goofy part of this is, there's a cutscene not too far into the game where one of your tanks takes 1 hit from a Panzerfaust and is completely disabled. So how come it works on our tanks but not on theirs? It's one of the few parts of the game that doesn't play fair. Since the rest of the game is so great, I can live with it, but it sure gets annoying after the third or fourth time you have to live with it. It's the same the one time you get a reloadable bazooka. You'll still need anywhere from 3 to 5 hits to destroy the tank, and meanwhile it's blasting away at you. The game does play fair in that there's plenty of ammo around, and when you're doing the Panzerfaust thing, the crates are bottomless. You never run out. But it just seems to me that the multiple hits thing shouldn't be necessary in the first place. We start at the end, something a lot of games were doing around this time. We see Baker dazed and on his back, you'll see that a lot, and a guy named Leggett daring the Germans to kill him. Well, of course they do. Why should you care? You're about to find out as Baker begins his narration of the story. Whenever we hear about D-Day in documentaries, history shows, books, or other media, the focus tends to be on the big picture. There's nothing wrong with that. It was the biggest invasion in the history of the planet after all. Road to Hill 30 gives us a different perspective on it. Baker and his men are dropped behind enemy lines to disrupt things and punch a hole in the German defenses, so the troops in armor that landed at Normandy on D-Day have a more or less clear path inland once they've established a beachhead. Unfortunately, just as they're about to jump, the plane gets hit by anti-aircraft fire and starts to go down. The men have to jump prematurely, and they end up scattered all over the countryside. Baker finds his platoon sergeant, Mac Hassey, and a little while later they link up with Leggett, who's another man from Baker's squad, and Lieutenant Colonel Cole. Mac takes the lead, and Baker and Leggett follow him. Your first task is to take out some anti-aircraft guns, and this is where you get the basic tutorial about using and reloading your weapons, using the situational view, and all that. As we make our way through the story, we see Baker and Mac gradually hooking up with the rest of their unit. Even though he's short-handed, Baker still has to find a way to accomplish the missions they've been assigned, because if they don't, major parts of the invasion will stall and give the Germans a chance to regroup and counterattack. His good right hand is Corporal Joe Hartsock, whom everybody calls Red because of his red hair. I always wondered about that. Why do people only do that with redheads? My whole life, nobody ever called me brown. And no, they don't call me gray now. I've never heard someone call a blonde guy yellow. Okay, there's that. But otherwise, I don't get it. But I digress. He hooks up with Leggett, Allen and Garnett, and several others. As we go along, he reflects on what they're like.
Hartsock is still telling stories about his bar fights. Obi is still talking about his Dane back home. McCreary is still kind of an asshole. It's good to be together.
Baker seems to excel at getting blown up and walking away from it. In one of the games, one of the other guys comments, "Baker, you spend more time on your back than Paddock's sister." It's sort of a running gag throughout the game, one of many. We learn about these guys, we form opinions of them, all punctuated by firefights with pockets of German resistance. A few missions in, we hook up with our first tank. Turns out it's operated by Baker's best friend from back home, George Reisner. This is the first time we have 2 units under our command, and we learn how to switch between them. George's tank isn't what you expect. When most of us think of World War II tanks, we think of the huge Shermans, but this is a smaller one. It has all the stuff you want from a tank, a nice big cannon, an endless ammo machine gun, and you can even climb onto it and use the machine gun yourself. So off we go with George.
Sunday in the park with George.
No.
George's just lucky, I guess.
No. Hell no! Can we do this?
Form up! Move! Red! You're with me!
You heard him, let's move!
Roger!
Baker's delighted to be reunited with his friend, and they spend some time catching up. Then it's time to move on in a level called Dead Man's Corner. This was what the American soldiers actually came to call it, and that's how it appears in the after-action reports. So we move out, but now we come to one of my big gripes about the game. Up to now, we've faced soldiers with rifles and machine guns, the occasional mounted machine gun, the MG-42, and some light artillery. But as soon as we have a tank with us, out of the blue, at least half the German soldiers have Panzerfausts. I'm sure it's to balance the odds in the game, but it seems a little too convenient for my tastes. They pretty much just come out of nowhere. There's no warning, no explanation, no nothing. That bothered me more than a little the first time I played the game, and it still bothers me. Exposition about this weapon could have been done a lot better. So you push down the road, punching through soldiers with Panzerfausts, machine gun nests, and all the rest, and you get to the corner. That's where this happens. Yep, Baker's best friend in the world, George, was just killed. I actually found myself mourning with him, especially in the next dialogue section when Baker is wondering what he's going to tell George's mother. It's heartrending at least. But there's no time to dwell on it because you still have a job to do. For the next segment, Mac is giving you 2 teams instead of just 1. Now you have a fire team equipped to put heavy fire on the enemy and keep them suppressed, and an assault team useful for flanking and taking the enemy out. It's easy to lose sight of the big objective as you play through these levels, but there really is one. You've been dropped behind enemy lines on D-Day, and your job was to clear a path to Carentan, one of the main towns just inland from the beaches of Normandy, so the guys who just landed with the main wave of invasion can start making their way across France. To do that, you fight your way through several smaller towns and farming areas, always with the goal of clearing a path for the other guys. Basically, while the guys you see in the pictures of the history books are hitting the Germans from one side, you're hitting them from the other side. This is one of the parts of the D-Day invasion that most of us never see or hear about, and seeing it from one soldier's perspective as it affects him and his buddies really drives home how important this was for bringing down the Nazis. There's dissension in the ranks at times, sometimes over really stupid stuff. Mac is usually around to put a stop to it, and some of these guys are just too hilarious for words.
Sissy toy?
Yeah, with a name like Batarang, why would anyone think Batman's a sissy?
Well, Superman doesn't even have a cool identity. He just puts on glasses and acts like a jackass.
And it's a wonder you don't like him, Leggett.
I happen to like superheroes that have a brain.
Leggett? He can melt things with his eyes! His eyes!
Knock it off! There's enough bullshit to fill a swimming pool around here.
Why would you fill...
Don't!
Remember what I said about using the Panzerfaust to take out a German tank? Well, here's your chance. This is worth watching in full.
Shit! I'm empty! Cover me!
Isn't that fun? Well, no. And you're pretty well stuck with it for the rest of the game. But this one at least has one small reward. You get to hear this from Mac.
You know, if I gave anyone else the order to attack a tank on foot, they'd probably just tell me to go to hell. You're one tough son of a bitch.
Your next task is to take a farmhouse. For this you have a Sherman tank, which is good because of course the Germans have Panzerfausts. They also have this thing. This is an 18mm artillery piece. Your guys just call it an 18. The main thing about it is it can do serious damage to your tank, so you want to take it out early. If you bring your tank up the only road into the farm, it'll be staring right down this thing's throat. My biggest gripe with the German artillery, like the 18 and later the 88mm flak gun, is that you can't use them. All you can do is put a satchel charge on them and blow them up, and you can't even do that with this one. It would have been nice to be able to commandeer this thing and use it to deal with the squads of foot soldiers scattered around the place. Once you take the farm, mortars start landing, so you have to go take out the mortar team. Unfortunately for you, they have a tank guarding them. This is one of the many tanks that you can't hop on and drop a grenade into, and there aren't any Panzerfausts around. No, the only way for this tank to be taken out is with your tank, so prepare for a nice Wild Bill Hickok type shootout. But sometimes, even when you win, you lose. Just as you finish taking out the tank and mortar team, you get this.
They're dead. There were too many of them. God.
Allen and Garnett were sent on a separate mission with Leggett in command, and now they're dead and Leggett is pretty well shattered. There's something weird about their deaths, and the squad doesn't really trust Leggett after that. For most of the rest of the game, he's off somewhere else with Mac, so we really don't know what's going on or what happened. Here's a spoiler for you. You won't actually find out until the third game, Hell's Highway, so stay tuned. One guy you get to know briefly but come to respect is Lieutenant Colonel Cole. He leads what came to be known as Cole's Charge, an assault on a German position that was key to this whole operation. It's kind of nice to see that in a day and age when the military, and especially officers, are usually depicted as bumbling idiots who've reached their level of incompetence, there's a story like this that shows some of the good ones. And at the end of the mission after his charge, he even finds some brandy for you and your men. You have to like an officer who leads you in a major assault and then gives you alcohol afterwards. Who could ask for more? This is one of the more linear World War II games I've seen. Here's a good example. In the previous mission, this barricade was blocking the road going the other way. Somehow, while the men were sitting around talking, it got moved so you can only go left now. We make it through the town of Carentan and end up facing a huge German counterattack at Hill 30. We get a nice pep talk just before we move out.
This is it! We're airborne because we're the best of the best! No one stands in our way! No one! Let's move!
I think he stole your line there, Baker.
We fight past a few German troops and catch up with Mac in a trench at the base of Hill 30. Things aren't looking good. They have tanks, and ours appears to be lost somewhere in the area. As the tanks start pounding us and knock Baker down for the third time in as many minutes, Leggett apparently snaps.
You want me? Fucking take me! Take me!
This is where we came in. But there's no time to reflect on it. He has to go find the American tanks and bring them to the battle while there's still a few American soldiers left. He has to make his way past a dozen German soldiers and not one, not two, but 3 German tanks with no means for taking them out. Once he finds the Americans, he has to direct their 2 tanks in such a way that they can destroy the 3 German tanks and still have enough help left to go rescue the men at Hill 30. It's a bitch, believe me, and it's a total rush. The game concludes with Hartsock getting promoted to sergeant and being given a squad of his own. Mac informs the men that there's a Colonel Marshall there to interview the men for General Eisenhower, setting us up for the story that we see in Earned in Blood. The ceremony's cut short by mortar fire, whereupon Mac tells everybody to grab their gear. They still have a war to fight. You see men running off with a promise of more action to come in the next game. This game does have some flaws, but they're minor. Overall, if you like FPS games and a really good story, give it a try. You won't be disappointed. Just don't try it in authentic mode unless you're a raging masochist. I have to admit, beating the game on authentic, yes, I have done that, gives a certain sense of accomplishment. Is it worth the screaming frustration along the way? I really didn't think so. The extras you unlock in authentic aren't really all that great. I suggest you try it on the first 3 difficulties and then decide, because the difficulty on hard is pretty close to what it is on authentic. As you play on hard, try to imagine doing that same thing with no suppression rings, no save points, no compass, no ammo indicator, and no save points. That'll tell you whether you want to try authentic. Whether you do authentic or not, though, you should be able to play this game anytime you don't have anything else to play and enjoy it to the max. After the first half dozen playthroughs, you can anticipate a lot of stuff, but it doesn't make it any less fun. Pick it up for your PC or for your Wii and enjoy it for many, many years. And it doesn't stop there. Next time we'll look at the second game, Earned in Blood, a worthy successor to an excellent game. This is one series that I hope keeps going for a very long time. I'm Irving, and I have no life, just like you.
Well, finally, Irving got 3 slugs in the belly. It was right outside the Frontier Deli. He was sitting there twirling his gun around, and Butterfingers Irving gunned himself down. Irving. Big fat Irving. Big dum-dum Irving. Big dum-dum dead Irving. The 142nd fastest gun in the West. Really?
Just as you finish taking out the tank and mortar time,